at World War One through images, and we're going to look at the images of the beginnings of World War One with the assassination. We're going to look at the leaders. We're going to look at some of the weapons used in World War One, and then we're also going to take a look at the soldiers and some more propaganda posters. One quick thing. I don't know how to pause or fix any of the audio clips in this, so I'm just going to talk, and if I make a mistake, I'm just moving on. So here we go. Images of World War One. So our first look will be at the beginning, and we're going to take a look at the assassination. And if you remember, the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand is what begins World War One in Europe. He goes to visit Serbia and with his wife, and even after he's told, hey, you probably shouldn't come here, there are people that want to kill you, he decides to go anyway. And he shows up with his wife, and as you can see in this picture, the motorcade that he is driving in, the vehicle he is an open air vehicle, which makes it very easy for Mr. Princip to walk up in very close range and shoot both the Archduke and his wife Sophie. He is then arrested, and at this point we go through this whole series of events that eventually ends with Austria beginning to bomb Serbia and Belgrade, where the assassination took place. And that begins in August of 1914, World War One. So now we're going to look at the pictures of the leaders, and we're going to begin with the Central Powers, or the Triple Alliance. And the head of that will be the Kaiser. This is Kaiser Wilhelm II, and he will be the leader of Germany. You can always recognize German soldiers because of that helmet with the pike. Germans are very much impressed with their military strength and prowess, so they always have this very stern look, this very regal appearance, and have a great admiration for their military. The Emperor of Austria-Hungary is Francis Joseph, with this very cool set of sideburns and mustache, excuse me. He is the uncle of the Archduke that was assassinated. And so again, because it's his heir to the throne that is assassinated, will be the first country and the leader of the country that takes action. We're going to move on to the Triple Entente, and these are the Allied powers. And the Allied powers will be led by Great Britain with two people, King George V, who I think is incredibly handsome in this picture. He is the son of Queen Victoria and the grandfather of the current Queen of the United Kingdom, Elizabeth II. And he's the king. And also, as a part of the leadership of Great Britain, is the Prime Minister, David Lloyd George. And just real quickly, a Prime Minister is not the same thing as a president. Prime Ministers are not elected by the people of Great Britain. The people of Great Britain elect what they call MPs, members of Parliament. And then once they elect the members of Parliament, whichever political party is the largest, from that political party, they then elect the Prime Minister. So if it's the Tories or the Labour Party or any other part of the cabinet, of the Parliament, they will elect the Prime Minister. So at this time of World War I, the Prime Minister is David Lloyd George. And then we also have the French Premier, who is Georges Clemenceau, and he's going to play a huge role when we get to the end of the World War I and the writing of the Treaty of Versailles, and this idea of getting revenge against Germany, which will lead to great retribution against Germany, which eventually is going to lead us right back to World War II. President Woodrow Wilson, and again, President Woodrow Wilson will play a crucial role in also the writing of the Treaty of Versailles with his 14 points and the understanding that when we get to the Treaty of Versailles, the power of Wilson's 14 points. And that is the stamp that was made in honor of Woodrow Wilson. We're not talking a lot about Russia in our class because, again, it's U.S. history and this doesn't have a huge impact on us. But Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, his first cousin is King George V, and you can probably see a great family resemblance. His mother is a sibling of Queen Victoria as well. Russia will enter World War I, but they will leave World War I due to a huge revolution that they will be having in their country at the same time, known as the Russian Revolution. This is the Premier of Italy, Vittorio Orlando. He doesn't play any role. Italy flip-flops, they go back and forth on either side, and so they will virtually really kind of take a backseat. Really not even a backseat. They're probably running behind the car, just trying to get into the backseat when we come to the Treaty of Versailles. I really like that analogy. I'm going to have to remember that. Because this slide, as it says, is the big four, but really it's the big three. The big four, again, Wilson, David Lloyd George, Clemenceau, and Orlando. Really, Orlando is not a part of this. Like the three of them will hold meetings and they say, oh, we forgot to tell you, but they really didn't tell you, Orlando. You're not a part of this. So we're going to start with the United States entering into World War I. And hopefully you remember that we enter into World War I mostly because of two things: the sinking of the Lusitania, and you can see a lot of these propaganda posters tied to the Lusitania. They'll enlist on the bottom right-hand side with the female and baby going to their watery grave, and then again a list on the crush the Huns, the menace of the seas. And then the second reason, again, that we go into World War I is the Zimmerman telegram. And again, this political cartoon is used to show the outrage that the United States felt at Germany saying, hey, Mexico, you can just take part of the United States. And so now the United States is in World War I. And so we're going to take a look at, again, some of the most important part of World War I are the soldiers and what soldiers lived through and the conditions that were part of their everyday life. So again, we start with German soldiers. And again, they are always recognizable because of that pike on top of their head. And again, one of the things as we go through this, if I don't remember to point it out, is make sure that you're looking at the weapons. So here we've got for the most part at that time period, a rapid firing machine gun. So this is again going to be devastating to the opposition, this rapid fire VIX machine gun. We also have airplane, the Red Baron, and the Red Baron is German. And those of you that are Peanuts or Snoopy fans, you'll recognize the Red Baron. Snoopy fought the Red Baron often in his imagination. But the Red Baron, again, is an essential part of the fighting for the Germans. Sergeant Alvin York, and I'm going to kind of leave this up here so that you can read this. Sergeant Alvin York, again, is an interesting part of World War I. He is a very devout Christian, and he keeps himself out. He was a pacifist for a long period of time, but then becomes one of the most heavily decorated soldiers in American history, not just World War I, but in American history, and will receive the Medal of Honor, the highest award that we give to our military. And here's just a picture of some cavalry troops, and you can tell they're cavalry troops because of their boots and those little riding pants that they wear. And again, I've got this here to show you. We just looked at a picture of a machine gun, but we also are going to have the cavalry. And again, just makes for such a strange group of weapons to fight this war. Now we're going to move into the trenches. And again, World War I is known for trench warfare, meaning these men dug these great giant trenches and they're going to do everything in those trenches: eat, sleep, fight, die, suffer, mud, lice, rats. It is a horrible existence that these men are going to be living through. One of the things that's always very terrifying is gas attacks. These are silent attacks. They don't know when they're going to happen. They use, for the most part, mustard gas, which is a really heavy gas. And so preparing for that is putting on these heavy gas masks. And again, it's 1914, 1917. These aren't the best types of gas masks. And we can see them not only in their gas mask, but hopefully you can take a look at this picture and see again these big, deep puddles of water that they're standing in, where their feet and their boots and their socks will maintain and be just sopping wet all of the time. This trench foot is fairly disgusting. I'll give you an opportunity to read that yourself. Trench foot will be called many different things during warfare, and one of the things that many things have been said about the Army is the Army moves on its stomach and its feet. And if you don't feed them, they're not going to move. And if you don't take care of their feet, they're not going to be able to move. Trench foot will be the same as jungle rot or any of those things. And so what I want you to think about as you continue to read this is what your feet used to look like when you were a kid and you stayed in the bathtub for like an hour and that get all wrinkly, or when you stay in the pool and your feet get all wrinkly. Well, here's what happens to that when you stay in wet boots and shoes for weeks on end. You get this thing called trench foot. And as you can see, it is debilitating. And in essence, what happens is your feet just expand out of your skin. Your feet just pop right out of your skin. It's disgusting, it's gross, and it will be always what, and no matter what war we're fighting, especially in World War I and eventually in Vietnam, that we'll get that same, in Vietnam we'll call it jungle rot for your feet, but taking care of your feet is essential. And those are just really gross. And I promise you, they're feet. Then we get rats. The rats that live in trenches are really not like mice, field mice. They are rats. They're huge. They're the size of cats, and they eat anything. They'll eat your food, they'll eat dead humans, and in some cases, even live humans. And these men hated these rats. And this picture shows you the size of these rats. Like, they're huge. And again, something that most of these men grew to absolutely detest as they lived and fought in these trenches. Again, trenches were where you lived and slept, and I hope you can notice, and I'm not sure if my mouse will click up, but if you look up in this area, that's a skeleton that they've dressed and put up for viewing in their resting spot and in the places where they live. Again, just more pictures of these men in their trenches living. There's no other place for them to go. They don't retreat out of these trenches. They're in these trenches days, on weeks, on months, on end. Rations for, this is a British soldier, that you can see their rations, their daily rations. Probably might interest most of you that there are two things on here that might question: rum, which that really is alcohol, and tobacco. Rum, again, is one of the reasons why many men joined the British Army, to get that daily allowance of alcohol. And cigarettes are also part of the kit. Cigarettes will be also given to military men all the way up through Vietnam. And if you know anyone that was in the military prior to the 1970s and they smoke, it's probably courtesy of the United States military. It was part of their kit, and it is the reason why, and this is severely off topic, why lots of people were able to sue tobacco companies for getting lung disease and cancer, because they were given these cigarettes by the United States government. Here's a diagram of a trench, and you can see this trench really has some structural means to it. They are equipped with a sump pump that should be pumping out that water. The problem is when the ground gets so muddy, it can't go anywhere else. There are places, again, for people to stand, people to sleep, and around this whole trench would be, at the bottom, you can see barbed wire. So that's the trench diagram. This is an aerial view of the trenches across Europe, and you can see that they're closely impacted, but you can see this wide open space here. This is no man's land. You can see how close you really are together, but yet how far apart you really are in moving from one trench to the other. And this will be a look at the weapons. This is Gallipoli, and this is soldiers making bombs. And then this is just this factory bomb. They're just putting inside of these old jam tins or inside of tin cans any kind of metal, old shells, barbed wire, nails, anything that they can put in that to explode. So that, in essence, is what we would probably refer to as a pipe bomb. So they're actually making pipe bombs. Also have grenades, different types of grenades here, potato masher, egg grenade. Those will be, again, used by both sides. At the same time, you've got this 12-inch mortar. This thing can throw a Volkswagen. It is enormous. It is tremendous. And one of the things that will have a lasting impact on the men involved in World War I will be that sound, that just constant shelling and not being able to have peace and quiet. And it will be part of, again, what will be called in World War I as shell shock. These men just have this, again, uh, uh, disorder that was mainly caused by these loud, just constant shelling from these machines. Then we have tanks. Here's some British tanks. We'll also have some in your assignment. You'll look at some American tanks. You can see they don't look like anything like tanks look today, and you can see why they will have difficulty in the terrain, because their wheelbase is so narrow and they will turn over and they won't do very well. We're not going to have any tank battles like we will in World War II. Here is the Vickers. This is a machine gun. It is highly effective, very reliable. And again, you can see there are lots of these ammo boxes floating around everywhere. And you can see how they're used, that this is laid across. You open the box and then you'll just fire straight through and use the Vickers as a machine gun. Very reliable weapon for the British Army. Here again, artillery, this just constant shelling that will happen night and day for days on end during World War I. So this is another weird part. We've got that shelling, but then we also have horses. And then we also have horses with gas masks, because again, they will be susceptible just as humans would be to that mustard gas. And here's a victim of mustard gas, and hopefully you can see all that blistering down here on his hand, around in and around his throat. In essence, you just kind of boil on the inside. It is a horrible way to die from this idea of mustard gas. We also will have new advances in plastic surgery. And one of the things, again, with plastic surgery will be the fact that these men are going up over the top of those trenches to run straight across no man's land. And so when they peek up top over the trench, and sitting across not too far away is a machine gun, that's the first thing that's going to get hit. So a lot of these men will survive, but they will be horribly disfigured. And what brings about is this new medical advancement called plastic surgery. And the reasons it's called plastic surgery is this is what will happen. They'll make a mold. These are all molds of men who have disfigured faces. And these men, these new doctors, will construct plastics to cover those disfigured faces. And you can see there's the disfigured face, and this plastic, if you can see that, is attached with his glasses. And so that becomes this thing known as plastic surgery. So we have that, and again, another one. This one will be attached again with mustache and glasses. And this will be one of the things that will actually make these men with these disfigured faces able to cope with their new disabilities. Propaganda posters. Not going to spend a lot of time on these because we did look at these in our assignments, but we are just going to take a quick pick of some of these propaganda posters. Again, always noting certain things that will be attached, that helmet, the devil with Germans, asking, what did you do to help? And that will be a big one, encouraging enlistment by asking, what did you do during the war? What did you do, Daddy? Were you out just surfing? Go help. Halt the Hun, and this is about selling Liberty bonds. Beat Germany, sow the seeds of victory. Different types of military branches, Marines on the right, the Navy on the left. And now we'll begin with death and destruction. And again, this is the horror of war and the parts that those men and the women, the nurses that participated, have just a horrible time when they return back to their homes. Again, these are photographs of death and destruction. We can see again the movement of the wounded, the dead through this no man's land, and how devastated the countryside is as a result of this war. Military casualties are enormous. You can look at Russia 1.7 million, Germany 1.9 million, France 1.3 million, Austria 1.2 million. The United States, 116,000. And again, you see that just total devastation in the casualties related to World War I. Some of the evacuation of the wounded troops. Again, the barbed wire crossing no man's land was almost impossible to navigate. Moving the dead again with horses, again this weird juxtaposition of tanks and then also using horses. Recovering the weapons from the dead. And last is this work of poetry in Flanders Field, and it is about poppies. And if you pay any attention on both Veterans Day, Memorial Day, we usually have some connection with poppies, especially on Veterans Day. And it comes from, again, this poetry. And in the Flanders Field where the poppies grow, we shall not sleep though poppies grow in Flanders Field. And sadly, Lieutenant Colonel McCrae, about 3 or 4 days after writing this, is going to be killed in World War I. So, this ends our PowerPoint, our images of World War I. Your assignment also has you looking at images of World War I as well. And at the end, you're going to write a letter as if you were a Red Cross volunteer and you were writing about the death and destruction. So as always, if you have any questions about this, please let me know. This is my first time doing this recording, so I hope it did record and I hope it makes some sense. And again, ask questions if you need to. And that is it.